Life is full of constant hustle, with people everywhere busy working, shopping, dining, and planning for the future. The Bible offers intriguing insights into this kind of everyday activity through ancient narratives that might still resonate today. Let's explore some of these biblical stories and see what they reveal about our times. The book of Genesis and the Gospel of Luke provide vivid portraits of humanity's past that seem to echo in today's world. The book of Luke, chapter 17, verse 26 states, "Just as it was in the days of Noah, so also will it be in the days of the Son of Man." This verse sets the stage by drawing a parallel between the ancient past and what is predicted for the future according to Christian eschatology, the study of the end times. During Noah's time, life went on as usual until the very day Noah entered the ark. People were eating and drinking, marrying and being given in marriage, completely oblivious to the impending disaster. Similarly, Luke recounts the days of Lot, where everyday activities like buying, selling, planting, and building dominated people's lives right up until destruction rained down on Sodom. These accounts are not just old stories. They serve as a warning. They suggest that, like the people of Noah and Lot's times, we might be equally unaware of significant spiritual and moral decay amidst our busy lives. The question arises, if these times are akin to our own, what lessons are we to learn? In both historical contexts, these scriptures highlight societies that were thriving materially but were spiritually bankrupt. In Genesis 6, verse 5, it is noted that the Lord saw how great the wickedness of the human race had become on the earth, and that every inclination of the thoughts of the human heart was only evil all the time. This description paints a bleak picture of a society consumed by its own desires, ignoring the spiritual and communal laws meant to uphold it. The response to such corruption was divine intervention. Noah's flood and the destruction of Sodom were both acts of judgment against unchecked moral decay. These events symbolize the seriousness with which these ancient texts treat the concept of societal justice and divine retribution. Today, when we look at our world, the parallels can seem striking. Our society, much like those of Noah and Lot, is marked by technological advancements and material prosperity. Yet, there are profound concerns about moral and spiritual decline, where individualism often overshadows community and ethical standards. The prophetic texts urge readers to reflect on these patterns. They warn of a future time, potentially akin to those days of Noah and Lot, where humanity might once again face a reckoning for its actions. This perspective isn't meant to frighten, but to prompt introspection and moral alignment. What, then, should we make of these comparisons? They encourage us to look beyond our daily routines and consider the bigger picture, how we live, interact, and prioritize our lives. They call us to consider not just what we are building, but the foundation on which we are building it. In the face of such biblical warnings, the call to action is clear. It's a call to foster communities that value integrity, kindness, and justice. It's a call to live not just for ourselves, but in ways that uphold and enrich the lives of others around us. Now, think about this. Into a world already full of trouble, enter the Nephilim. Described in Genesis, these were not your average folks. They were stronger, mightier, and quite literally larger than life. But instead of making things better, they seem to only make things worse. Their very existence pulled people even further from God, turning attention to their might rather than the Creator's will. It was a world slipping faster and faster into chaos and sin. Imagine how that felt for God, looking down on His creation. Genesis 6, verse 6 tells us, "The Lord regretted that He had made human beings on the earth, and His heart was deeply troubled." This isn't just a simple sadness. This is a divine grief, a profound sorrow that goes beyond what we can fully understand. It's like a parent whose heart breaks over the choices of a wayward child, but infinitely deeper. And in that sorrow, God made a tough choice. The book of Genesis chapter 6, verse 7 records His decision. "So the Lord said, I will wipe from the face of the earth the human race I have created, and with them the animals, the birds and the creatures that move along the ground, for I am grieved that I have made them." It's a heartbreaking decision to start over because the world had become so filled with violence and corruption. But even in this dark chapter of human history, there's a glimmer of hope. A man named Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord. Genesis 6 verse 8 says, "But Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord." Here was a man different from the rest. Noah stood out, not just for his righteousness, but also as a beacon of hope in a failing world. Noah wasn't just any man. He was a descendant of Adam through Seth, coming from a line of men like Enoch and Methuselah, who had walked faithfully with God. This heritage of faithfulness set the stage for Noah, who not only inherited this legacy, but also lived it out passionately. As a family man, Noah instilled these virtues in his children. Despite the prevailing darkness around them, Noah's home was a haven of godliness. When God shared His sorrowful decision to cleanse the earth with a flood, Noah's faith didn't waver. Instead, he accepted the gravity of his task with a heavy yet resolute heart. God's plan was drastic. "I am going to put an end to all people, for the earth is filled with violence because of them. I am surely going to destroy both them and the earth," God declared in Genesis 6, verse 13. It was clear. Humanity's actions had consequences, and the earth itself bore the weight of human sin. Noah's response: obedience. He began building an ark, a massive task that made him the subject of ridicule and disbelief among his contemporaries. Yet he persisted, warning them of the coming flood, faithfully preparing for a future only he believed would come. The day finally arrived. As dark clouds gathered, God gave Noah a direct command in Genesis 7 verse 1, "Come into the ark, you and all your household, because I have seen that you are righteous before me in this generation." In this moment, Noah, his family, and the creatures of the earth stepped into the ark, and the door shut behind them. Then the rains came, softly at first, then pouring down in torrents, continuing for 40 days and 40 nights. The world outside was washed away, while inside the ark, life persisted, afloat on the boundless seas, kept safe by a promise. This promise was more than just survival. It was a covenant between God and all living creatures. It signified that even in the darkest times, hope and goodness could survive. Noah and his family held on to that promise, faithful that the waters would eventually recede and that they would step out into a new beginning. And so, as the rain stopped and the waters began to recede, Noah's wait turned into a realization. The covenant God had made was true, a promise of a new beginning for humanity and all living creatures on earth. This story, set in the most catastrophic of times, reminds us of the power of faith and the possibility of renewal, no matter how dark the days may seem. Just like Noah, we're called to be beacons of hope and righteousness in our time, anchoring our actions in faith and looking forward to a future shaped not by our past mistakes, but by our present resilience and integrity. The story of Adam and Eve's disobedience is not just a tale from the past. It's a vivid lesson about the consequences that follow when we choose to ignore what we know is right. This pivotal moment in Genesis 3 changed everything for humanity. By choosing to eat from the forbidden tree, they introduced sin and death into the world, impacting not only themselves, but all their descendants. Genesis reflects on this moment and its aftermath, telling us about the spread of sin and how it tainted the very essence of human existence. It serves as a sobering reminder that our actions have far-reaching effects. It tells us, therefore, just as sin entered the world through one man and death through sin, and in this way death came to all people because all sinned. Romans 5, verse 12. Fast forward to the time of Noah, and we see a similar pattern. Humanity hadn't learned much from past mistakes. In fact, things had gotten so bad that God felt profound grief over the state of his creation. Despite the chaos, there was Noah, a beacon of righteousness in a sea of moral decay. Noah's life tells us that no matter how dark the world around us becomes, we can still choose to be good, to do the right thing. His story is not just about survival. It's about maintaining integrity and faithfulness even when no one else does. When the flood came, it washed away everything except the sanctuary that Noah had built in his faithfulness. After the waters receded, God made a promise, symbolized by a rainbow. I have set my rainbow in the clouds, and it will be the sign of the covenant between me and the earth. Genesis 9, verse 13. This covenant wasn't just with Noah, but with all future generations, a promise of hope and a fresh start. However, even with such promises, we often find ourselves distracted by the world around us. Jesus in Luke chapter 17, verses 27 to 28, describes the day-to-day activities that consumed the people of Noah and Lot's times. They were eating, drinking, marrying, and more, completely engrossed in their lives up to the moment disaster struck. This isn't to say that enjoying life's pleasures is wrong, but there's a danger in becoming so absorbed in materialism that we lose sight of spiritual and eternal values. They were so immersed in the material, they no longer had any understanding or alertness for the spiritual and the eternal. Reflects the stark reality that materialism can blind us to more important spiritual truths. Today, we face a similar challenge. Our world is filled with distractions that can pull us away from focusing on what truly matters. If we're not careful, we too can fall into the same trap as those before us, missing the signs and warnings that call for a deeper, more meaningful engagement with life and with God. The lesson from Noah, the promise of God's covenant, and the warnings from Jesus all point us towards a need for balance. We must find a way to enjoy the blessings of life without losing our connection to the spiritual and the eternal. By doing so, we prepare not just to survive the storms, but to thrive in the promise of a renewed creation. Understanding the days of Noah isn't just about studying past events. It's about seeing a mirror into our own times and perhaps even into what lies ahead. The book of Genesis, chapter 6, verse 9, paints a picture of Noah as a just man, perfect in his generations, a rare breed in a world that had gone awry. It says, Noah walked with God. This wasn't just a casual stroll. It was a life lived in step with the divine, an intimate connection that made all the difference. Now, imagine being Noah. Around you, the world is spiraling into chaos, yet you're called to maintain a path of righteousness. That's no small feat. The scripture isn't just giving us a history lesson, it's setting a standard. It's telling us that even in the midst of overwhelming evil, maintaining a relationship with God isn't just possible, it's crucial. Noah's life was a beacon of hope then, and it remains so today. When everything around him was corrupt, he and his family stood as the sole survivors of the great flood. This isn't just about survival, though. It's about spiritual survival. This historical account goes beyond mere survival tips. It serves as a blueprint for us, suggesting that those who live like Noah, aligned with God's ways, have a promise of safety, not just from physical calamities, but from spiritual downfall. The evil and frightening times of Noah and Lot are likened to our current era in many ways, showing us that our spiritual challenges aren't entirely new. We are reminded that no matter how dark the days get, God has a plan. There's a divine strategy in place, one that includes not only warnings and guidance, but also protection. During Noah's time, that protection meant building an ark. Today, it might mean fostering strong communities of faith or deepening our own spiritual practices. Moreover, God's promises are as steadfast now as they were then. The book of Genesis 9 says, I have set my rainbow in the clouds, and it will be the sign of the covenant between me and the earth. This was God's sign that he would never again flood the entire earth, a symbol of hope and a reminder of God's enduring mercy. But what about us today? We're not building arks, but we are called to build lives that can withstand the floods of life. Just as Noah did, we face the task of navigating through our modern complexities while keeping our integrity and faith intact. The world around us may often seem just as corrupt and filled with sin as it was in Noah's time, but the call to live righteously remains the same. Jesus in Luke chapter 17 verses 27 to 28 details the everyday activities that clouded people's awareness in the days of Noah and Lot, like eating, drinking, marrying, and more. While these activities are normal and not inherently wrong, they became distractions from recognizing the signs of the times. The danger, as Jesus points out, lies not in the activities themselves, but in becoming so absorbed by them that we lose sight of the spiritual and eternal. This brings us back to the idea of materialism, which can be a major distraction in recognizing and responding to spiritual truths. Our society today, much like in the days of Noah, often values the material over the spiritual, the immediate over the eternal. It's a challenge that requires us to be vigilant and discerning. So, Let us approach our days with the wisdom and resolve shown by Noah. Let's strive to recognize the signs of our times, to prioritize our spiritual well-being, and to maintain our integrity amid the chaos. Let us remember that, through it all, God's promises and guidance remain, offering us not just a blueprint for survival, but for a life lived fully in the light of His truth.